And of course, you can bring them in and ask questions about your lab reports if you need to, okay? Remember also that in there is an observations video, so if you're not liking how your pictures turned out, okay, it is okay to use the video and take screen grabs of it, especially if you weren't here, okay? And you'd just like to get the screen grabs and see kind of what everything looked like, you can totally do that. I have no problem with you doing that as long as you have the lab diagrams in the proper format. Okay, you can use my pictures or your own. Okay, either way is fine. If you were absent and you still want to try using the microscope, then pop in and maybe like tomorrow at let's say Thursday at lunch, okay, and I can get you back in there if you want, and you can use the microscopes and get the pictures for yourself. Totally up to you. Okay, any of those options is fine. Okay. All right, so today we are going to go over plant versus animal cells. We're even going to give you your diagrams today, and we're going to label them, and then tomorrow we'll talk more about what all the parts of the cell do. Okay. Other thing, this Friday's quiz, okay, is only going to be on cell theory, microscopy, and today's lesson. All right, so the stuff on Wednesday and Thursday will not be on this Friday's quiz. So the practice quizzes for this week are just 1 and 2. All right, so all the parts of the cell and what they do, which is what we're starting tomorrow, okay, and even the diagrams, you're not going to be asked to label any diagrams on this Friday's quiz. Next Friday, on the other hand, is all about the parts of the cell and what they do in cell transport and all of that. But for this Friday, it's just cell theory, using the microscope, okay, and the stuff we go over about plants and animal cells minus the labeling. Okay, that's this Friday's quiz. All right, so we're going to look at plant and animal cells. We're going to look at similarities. We're going to look at differences. Why are those differences present? Why are the similarities present? Okay, so that's kind of points 1 and 2. And then obviously after that, correctly label plant and animal cells. Okay, that'll be a big deal moving forward after this week as well. Okay, so why do you suppose plant and animal cells are different? Why do they look different and have some structures that are different? Any ideas? Where do plants get their energy from? From the sun. What process? Photosynthesis. Okay, do you suppose you need different metabolic machinery to carry out that process versus what animals do when they eat food? Very different. Okay, you need very different metabolic machinery to carry out those processes. Now, here's the weird thing. After that, everything else is the same. Okay, the reason for the main differences, or the main reason for the differences between plant and animal cells is how they get their sugar. Okay? Plants make their own using sunlight and carbon dioxide photosynthesis. Animals consume living, or, well, let's say the tissue from other organisms in order to sustain themselves. That stuff is digested and turned into sugars, which are then burned. Okay? Once the sugars are made, either plant or animal, the process after that is the same, cellular respiration. Right, that is the process. Basically, it's a combustion reaction, okay, that just consumes the glucose and releases carbon dioxide and water. Right, so the main differences are how you get your raw energy, glucose. Okay, that's the main reason for the differences. All right, so how you get your sugar, how you get your fuel is referred to as your mode of nutrition. Those 3 words are going to be super important. Okay? Your mode of nutrition is how you get your fuel. Now, 99% of all life on Earth basically falls into 2 categories in terms of modes of nutrition. Right? Photosynthetic, and the kind like animals and fungi and decomposers and stuff that have to consume the material from other organisms. Okay, there are some exceptionally rare modes of nutrition. Okay, like there are some chemoautotrophs that would live in the deep ocean near volcanic vents and things like that. Their metabolism is very, very different. Okay, there's a few other extraordinarily rare types of modes of nutrition, but we're not going to be concerned with those. We're going to be concerned with the two main kinds. Okay, and that is organisms that get their fuel from other organisms and organisms that make their own fuel using photosynthesis. Okay? All right, so the modes of nutrition is why plant and animal cells are different. Okay, so the different modes of nutrition is where the biggest cellular structure differences occur. Okay, what does a plant need in order to carry out photosynthesis? What are the raw materials? Water? What else? It's a gas. Carbon dioxide. Yeah, you guys ever heard this? A plant, if you talk to your plant, it grows better? It's 100% true, okay? And you don't even have to talk nicely, okay? You don't even have to talk. You can just breathe on it, and it'll grow better because you're exhaling carbon dioxide. If you do that regularly, it absorbs the carbon dioxide from your breath, and it will use that to carry out photosynthesis. As long as it's got a light source, it's happy. It's like you're feeding it, okay? They actually also did a study about the tone of voice you use, and apparently talking nasty to your plant is also not good for it, but apparently, I don't know, I don't buy that for a second, but okay, apparently there's also an effect if you say nice things, it grows better, but I don't know. Okay, but talking to it will definitely make it grow better because you give it what it needs. It needs carbon dioxide, all right? So if we look at what photosynthesis looks like, okay, photosynthesis basically looks like this. Carbon dioxide plus water, okay, gives C6H12O6, okay, that's glucose, and oxygen. Does that look like any of the reaction types we learned last unit? Which one? Looks like a combustion reaction, except it's because that's exactly what photosynthesis is. Think about it. What do you burn in a fire? Wood. What's wood? Plants. What do plants do? They carry this out. They make this. Okay? And then when we eat the plants, or the plants catch on fire, or whatever, okay, the process goes in reverse and releases this. Okay? These are the two reactions that essentially make up what we call the carbon cycle, okay, and make life on Earth possible. Okay, so this reaction here is cellular respiration. Okay? Animals and plants both use that reaction. This reaction here is photosynthesis. One provides the raw materials for the other. Okay? So this is the carbon cycle, if you learned about that in junior high. Okay? One of these things produces the starting materials for the other, and then when that one happens, it produces the starting materials for the one that gave it. Okay? So they just keep cycling back and forth, back and forth. Okay? Now, animals and fungi and other decomposers and things like that, okay, they only carry out cellular respiration. They can't make their own food. They have to consume other organisms to get this. Okay, now, how often do we consume food that's just glucose? You ever eat just glucose? Probably not. Okay, it's not like something that's just readily an ingredient in most foods. Okay, but our bodies, through the process of digestion, break down the foods we eat into glucose. It's why things like sugars are such high calorie. Like if you have table sugar can be broken up into many molecules of glucose. Okay, so fructose, for example, is 2 glucose molecules. Okay, so if you split a fructose molecule, okay, just sugar, table sugar, okay, you've got 2 molecules of glucose. And your body can do that like that. Okay, so it loves sugar. Sugars are very easily converted into energy. Carbohydrates, the same thing. Eat bread or rice or pasta, okay, those are made of starches. Okay, starches are lots of sugars chained together, okay, so your body can easily break them down and release the energy. Okay, it's why if you're looking to lose weight, one of the first things you cut out of your diet is sugar. Yeah, sugar and carbohydrates and things like that. Okay, because your body can convert them to energy so easily. Right? Now, we don't just obviously consume carbohydrates, we consume other things like fats. Okay? Fats are probably the next quickest thing your body can break down into energy. Okay? It'll convert fats into glucose and fatty acids and things like that pretty easily. It's why our bodies store excess energy as fat. Okay? Because it can right away go, oh, we're a little, low on energy today. We'll just break down some of that stuff we were storing, that stuff right here, okay? And we'll break it down and we'll get it, turned into glucose quick, and the body's got what it needs. Okay? That's why our bodies work that way. Plants also store energy, but they store it as starch. Okay? Like a potato, for example. Okay? Potatoes are basically energy storage structures for plants. Okay? It's plant fat. Okay? They also make oils and things like that, but generally starch is plant fat. Okay? Which is why things like French fries are so high in energy, and why our body craves things like that from time to time. If we're a little bit hungry, your body automatically craves things it knows have lots of energy. Okay? I mean, what are French fries? They're potatoes cooked in fat. Okay, so they're the 2 highest energy molecules combined. It's why they're so yummy. Okay, it's why our body finds things like that desirable. It's like, hey, there's lots of energy right here. So if we tell the brain that we like that stuff, it'll eat more of it. Okay, it's kind of a natural feedback loop that our body has. Okay, so all organisms use cellular respiration, plants included. Okay, plants will use photosynthesis to make their own sugar and then burn it in cellular respiration. Okay, everybody all right with that? And then obviously animals can eat plants or eat other animals and get their energy, digest it, and turn it into glucose, which then they'll carry out cellular respiration as well. All right, questions on that so far? Okay, first nutritional mode or mode of nutrition are chemoheterotrophs. Okay, so chemoheterotrophs, okay, the kind of makeup of this word is chemical other feeder. Okay, so they have to feed on other organisms to get their chemical energy. Chemoheterotroph. Okay, so make sure you got that word highlighted. That is definitely a word I would expect you to use maybe in the analysis of your next lab, not the microscopy one, but the next one. Okay, answers on quizzes and tests. Okay, it's a mode of nutrition you need to know. Chemoheterotrophs are organisms that consume other organisms as a source of energy. Okay, so that is our mode of nutrition. Okay, we consume the materials from other organisms for food, plants, animals, okay, whatever. And then we break them down chemically to produce glucose, and then cellular respiration releases the energy in the glucose. Anybody in here ever had an IV? Okay, now, in an IV, okay, there's different kinds, right? You can get the saline IV, okay, it's usually just a very dilute sodium chloride solution, okay, just enough to help your body absorb the water that's in the IV, okay? So you maybe had that if you were really dehydrated, okay, something like that, they hook you up to one of those, okay? Sometimes they'll also hook you up with some glucose in the IV, okay? What's the purpose of that? Sugar. Yeah, if you're really down, okay, like in terms of your metabolism, things like that, they'll give you not only the saline IV, but they will also give you a glucose IV so that your body can rapidly start carrying out cellular respiration, okay? Okay, so examples of chemoheterotrophs. Obviously, your top carnivores, okay, shark, okay, lion, wolf, okay, those are definitely all chemoheterotrophs. They're obviously consuming other organisms for food, okay? What about a worm? What does a worm eat? Dirt. What's in the dirt? Dead stuff. Okay, I mean, that's what topsoil is. It's dead stuff. Okay, it's dead plants, bugs, animals, whatever. Okay, they just eat the stuff that's in the dirt. Okay, and then they poop it back out and they make the soil richer. Okay, for having done that. Okay, but they're consuming the material from other organisms. Those organisms don't have to be alive. Okay, as long as it's the material from another organism, okay, then it counts as a chemoheterotroph. It is getting its energy from organic material. Okay, from some other organism. Okay, what about a fungus? Okay, what do they eat? They eat whatever they're growing on. Okay, for a long, long time, fungi were grouped in with plants, which was very, very wrong. Is a mushroom a plant? Plants carry out photosynthesis. Mushrooms grow in the dark. They can't possibly be a plant. They also don't have any chlorophyll. Okay? They don't have any chloroplasts. They don't have any of those organelles that carry out photosynthesis. Okay? Fungi are decomposers generally. Sometimes they're even parasitic. They are growing on whatever, or they are eating whatever it is they're growing on. So, how many people have ever got one of those rings of mushrooms in their yard? Right, the fairy ring? That, okay? So that fungus is actually eating the roots of your grass. It's why the grass inside the ring dies. Okay? Because what that fungus is growing on is the roots of those blades of grass. Okay? So it's consuming them as its food. Right? If you see, one of those bracket fungi that's growing on the trunk of a tree, it's eating the tree. Got athlete's foot? It's eating you. How many people desperately want to scratch their foot right now? I'll make it even worse. Same fungus lives on your head and causes dandruff. Anybody want to dig their fingernails into their scalp right now? Okay, there's a fungi living on you all the time. Okay, those fungi are always there. Your immune system generally keeps them in check. Okay, if the conditions are right, they can get a little bit out of control. Okay, and they will feast on you. That's what they do. It's in fact why they're itchy. Okay. The reason that athlete's foot is itchy is because the fungus is eating you. It's killing your cells and using them for food. Right? Now, here's how that works, in case you want to be really grossed out. Okay? So inside the fungi have these little feeding tentacles, basically. They're called hyphae. Okay? Unlike us, our digestion is all internal, right? We eat something, the digestion all happens inside of our body. Fungi do their digestion externally. So the hyphae look like a root, except they're microscopic. Okay? That root goes into whatever it is it's eating, your feet. Okay? And then it secretes digestive enzymes that dissolve the material around it, and then it absorbs that material. Okay? It's essentially digesting you and using you for food. Weird, but true. Okay? All parasitic fungi work kind of like that. Okay? But in the end, they're still a chemoheterotroph. They are digesting and using the chemicals from another organism to live. Okay? All right. Now, to be a chemoheterotroph, your cells will have to contain these lysosomes. Lysosomes are organelles, so an organ within the cell, organelle, okay, that produce digestive enzymes. Okay? And they can break down complex materials, proteins, starches, and things like that, okay, into simpler things like glucose that your cell can use for fuel. Would a plant have those? Plants don't have lysosomes. Okay? Even a Venus flytrap or a sundew or any of the other carnivorous plants you're probably thinking of, okay, they do not have lysosomes. They have the ability to make digestive enzymes, but they don't have lysosomes. That's one of the things that is characteristic of a chemoheterotroph's cells. Okay? A plant will not have those. Okay? All right, so that's one of the differences, okay, between a chemoheterotroph cell and a plant cell, okay, is the presence of a lysosome, something that can digest food. Okay, so if we're looking at a typical animal cell, which is obviously a chemoheterotroph, okay, it's going to look something like this, right? And we do see the lysosomes, okay? They're these little blue bubbles, essentially. They come off of the Golgi apparatus. The Golgi apparatus is actually what makes them. Okay, so they'll come off of those, okay, and inside will be digestive enzymes. Okay. Now, something else that animal cells don't have that you would see on the outside of a plant cell, what would it be? What goes around the outside of a plant cell that animal cells don't have? A cell wall. Okay? Having a cell wall makes the cells very, very rigid and stiff. Okay? If you're an animal, do you want your cells to be stiff and rigid? If you were an animal and your cells were stiff and rigid, you'd look like you came out of Minecraft, and not the terrible movie like the game. Okay, it's like a block. Okay, you would walk like, because you wouldn't be able to move. You wouldn't have that flexibility. Is flexibility important if you have to chase down and consume your food? Okay, so animal cells don't have a cell wall. Okay, and the reason for that is it allows them to be flexible, change shape, and move easily. Okay. Plants use the cell wall to keep themselves upright, okay, to show the blade of their leaf to the sun, okay, and keep it kind of stiff. Okay, so to give you an example here, I've been starving that plant of water over there. Okay, this plant's nice and healthy, right? So you can see that the leaves, okay, are all sticking so that the blade is facing up to the light, right? Okay, that plant has been watered lately. This plant, look at all the leaves. How do they look? Are they upright facing the lights? They're curled up and saggy, right? This plant's thirsty, okay? Without some of the structures inside the plant cell, the cell wall can't hold the plant rigid like that, and it wilts. Okay, you guys heard that term before, right? Like a wilted plant. Okay, so that plant is wilted, Okay? Because for whatever reason, it just seems to use a ton of water, when the others don't. Like that plant I watered the same day as I watered that plant, but it looks fine and that one doesn't. Okay? There's lots of differences. I torment my plants. When we go further into the plant unit, you'll see all the other things I do to them, okay? Just for the purpose of teaching you something, the biology, right? So the cell walls are what enable the plant to have its leaves face the sun. If the plant becomes stressed, then it'll let the leaves go limp so that it doesn't use as much water, okay? So animal cells don't have the cell wall, helps them remain flexible, okay? Other structures, okay, that are going to be in an animal cell that will not be in a plant cell have to do with this flexibility, okay? And they are the centrioles. Plant cells don't have those, only animal cells, okay? The reason for that is that centrioles help with cell division. Because an animal is mobile, okay, and its cell can change shape, it needs to have these centrioles to help it when the cell is going to divide. Because if the cell were to change shape while it's in the process of dividing, it might not get the DNA to the right sides of the cell, and then both cells would then die, okay? So what essentially happens in an animal cell, okay, so when an animal cell is getting ready to divide, well, any cell actually, okay, all of its chromosomes line up along the middle. Okay, it's called the metaphase plate. You don't need to know that till Bio 20. Okay, and then one centriole goes to each pole. And the centrioles will send out little, they're like a cable. They're obviously not metal, but they're like a cable. Okay, and each one will grab a copy of that chromosome for the new cell. Okay, this way, if the cell changes shape while division is going on, those chromosomes are still going to go to the right side because they're actually being pulled there. Plant cells don't need that because their cells are rigid and they're not going to change shape. Everything just naturally migrates to the right side on its own. Okay? But animal cells need to ensure that this process happens, so they have centrioles. Okay? So you don't necessarily need to write down what centrioles do right now, but you need to make a note that centrioles, lysosomes, are in chemoheterotrophs only. Okay? Or animal cells only. Okay, and the last thing, okay, are the presence of, I'm actually going to cross that word out and write the correct word, okay. The other thing that they will have is something called a cytoskeleton. Okay, cyto means cell, skeleton obviously means like structure, okay. These are not bones, okay, your cell does not have bones, right? But what it does have is little like microfibers, microtubules. They look like, well, not that we could see them with our microscopes, but if you could see them with an electron microscope, they look kind of like a rope or a cable or a bungee cord. Okay, probably a bungee cord is a better analogy. Okay, and they attach to different sides of the cell. So you don't really see them very well in this diagram. They're kind of these faded gray lines here. Okay, and they attach to different parts of the cell. And just like a bungee cord, they can stretch, but they'll pull the cell back to its original shape. So they allow the cell that flexibility to change shape, but they'll keep it from stretching too far and tearing. Okay? Now, are some cells going to tear anyway? Yeah. Your muscle cells tear all the time. Okay? If you work out, okay, you go to the gym, play sports, you're constantly tearing muscle cells. Okay? If you tear all of them in one muscle, that's bad. That's an injury. Okay? That's a torn muscle. Okay? But if you tear some of them, they'll grow back together. And when they grow back together stronger. Okay? It's how bodybuilding, okay, training, all of that kind of stuff works. Okay? You break some of those cells, but they grow right back together, and they grow back together a little bit stronger each time. Okay? So that's all part of having that cytoskeleton in there. Okay, questions there? All right, so the things an animal cell has or doesn't have that are different. Okay? They have lysosomes, they digest food. They have the centrioles that help with cell division. They have the cytoskeleton that keeps the cell from, changing too much or stretching too much, and they only have a cell membrane, no cell wall. Okay, everybody good there? All right, the other mode of nutrition we're going to talk about, photoautotrophs. Photo means light, auto means self, troph means feeding. Okay, so photoautotroph, light, self-feeding. Okay, chemoheterotroph, other, okay, organism for feeding. Okay, chemicals from other organisms for feeding. Okay, photoautotroph, light, self-feeder. Okay, so plant cells obviously can produce their own food as long as they have carbon dioxide and water available, and of course, light as the energy source. Okay, so this is that carbon cycle thing I was telling you about before, okay, where we produce the raw materials for plants, plants produce the raw materials for us, okay, not just in the sugars, but also the oxygen that we need to consume it, okay, all of that kind of stuff. Okay, so photoautotrophs, okay, obviously are photosynthetic. So, what are the things that plant cells have to have in order to be photoautotrophs? Okay, well, the biggest, most important one is their photosynthetic organ, the chloroplasts. Okay, chloroplasts are actually quite large. And when we do our cell anatomy lab, you'll be able to see them. Okay, the plant cells that we look at have lots of them in it. They're very, very easy to see. Okay, so the chloroplast is kind of a oblong shaped organelle, kind of a little bit like an oval. And sometimes if you're really lucky, okay, you can actually see what looks like stacks of coins or stacks of like poker chips inside. Those are called a thylakoid. Not going to need to know that. Okay, but that's actually where the nuts and bolts of the photosynthesis reaction occur. Okay, so the chloroplast is the thing that actually carries out photosynthesis. And first unit of Bio 20, you talk about how photosynthesis and cellular respiration work biochemically. Okay, photosynthesis is actually two separate processes. Okay, there's what we call the light reactions, which have to do with capturing the light energy, okay, and kind of setting it up so that the Calvin cycle can happen, the Calvin cycle is part of where the glucose is produced. So this is the light capturing part where the electrons get excited and they move to the higher energy levels, okay? And then that powers the Calvin cycle, which is actually where the carbon dioxide, okay, gets broken up and glucose gets produced. Okay, everybody okay with that? Now, inside the plant cell, okay, chloroplasts are going to look like this. Okay, this thing right here is a chloroplast. That one over there. They usually have more than two. All right, so I mean that's just a representative diagram, but the one cells we look at we're going to be looking at like 50 of them in there. Okay, so there's lots in there. Okay, they're also going to have that outer cell wall, and they're going to have a large water vacuole. Okay, it just says vacuole here, but it's actually a water vacuole. Okay, the water vacuole and the cell wall work together to make the plant look like this. Okay, if the cell wall is healthy and the water vacuole is full, then the cell will be rigid. Okay, and the plant will be nice and healthy and the leaves will look up. Okay, if the cell wall is healthy but the water vacuole is empty, then the plant looks like this. Okay, a wilted plant doesn't have full water vacuoles. The water vacuole inside pushes against the cell wall. Okay, and that's what actually supports the full leaf of the plant. The green leafy parts of the plant are supported by that. Obviously, if you're talking about a big old tree, the trunk is something different. Okay, we'll talk about that more in the plant unit. That's not water vacuoles. Okay, but the leafy parts of the plant are supported by the water vacuole and the cell wall. Okay, very important that those work because obviously we need to have the leaf facing the light so the plant can carry out photosynthesis. Okay, this is a natural reaction to I don't have enough water to carry out photosynthesis anymore, so I'm going to curl up and hide. Okay, just a natural reaction to that. Okay, questions so far? Okay, so the big one, we have the chloroplast. Okay, photoautotrophs all have chloroplasts. Okay, they're also going to have cell walls and they're going to have water vacuoles. Okay, and those are going to be the main differences. Okay, after that, the processes are all the same. Okay, this plant cell's got mitochondria. So does the animal cell. Okay? The mitochondria is where the cellular respiration occurs, where the sugar is broken down. Okay? Both animals and plants, glucose is their fuel. They have to have the same organelle to carry that process out. Okay? So it's just where do you get your glucose? Okay? Where and how do you get your glucose? That determines what kind of cell you're going to have. Okay, questions there? All right, I'm going to give you guys about a 5-minute break here, and then we'll continue on with this. There'll be a few questions for you to answer, and then we'll label our cell diagrams and talk about what the parts of the cell do. Okay, so you got 5 minutes here. 9:20, we'll come back. So, if we're looking at the plant cell and the animal cell side by side, okay, just human nature, our eyes are naturally attracted to the differences. Okay, the differences are more obvious always than the similarities. Okay, so we see the things like this has got a rigid cell wall and kind of a fixed shape. Okay, it's got a big water vacuole. It's got these green things in it. Yeah, obviously that's different. Okay, but if we're looking at the animal cell, we don't see those things. But what we need to notice is that okay, the stuff that's in black is stuff that's all the same. Okay, the stuff that's in green, well, that's plant cell only. Well, that's okay. I mean, even the water vacuole, because it's a little bit different, that should really be green. Okay, chloroplast, cell wall, those definitely plant only. Okay, water vacuole should be plant only. Okay, but then when we're looking at the animal cell, okay, we got centrioles. That's animal only. The lysosome, that should also be in red. Okay, it's animal only. Okay, you don't see one going over here into the plant cell. Right? There's lots of things though that are in common. Okay, tons of things that they all have in common. Everything basically in black, okay, is common to both. So, what does that mean from an evolutionary point of view? I think we talked about this the other day. Not different, but the same. Yeah, they must have a common ancestor somewhere in the distant past that shared all these structures in black. Okay, it's more likely that evolution caused them to diverge than to converge and have all these things in common. Okay, I mean, having those two cells come together as a result of completely separate evolutionary paths are the same odds of you having a perfect doppelganger. Okay, you guys all know what a doppelganger is, right? It's that one person who's not related to you in the world that looks just like you. Okay, that doesn't happen, right? There's no like perfect doppelganger for you, okay, anywhere in here. There's no way that these two things evolved to have all these structures in common from completely separate places. All right, it is far more likely, and the fossil record supports this, okay, that they had a common ancestor in the distant past that had these things. Now, which one do you suppose shows up first? Plants or animals? Like that distant ancestor, would it have been more like plants or more like animals? If animals show up first, what do they eat? Well, cannibalism has never been shown to be something that really works well long term. But, I mean, that's what they would have to eat. So, right, probably not animals first then, right? I mean, think about what early Earth would have been like. A lot of carbon dioxide, plenty of water, lots of sunlight. Okay? If you can make your own food using those simple, readily available raw materials, you're going to do just fine. Okay? There would have been nothing for animals to eat. They had to come after, because the first animals probably ate plants. Yeah. Okay? Kind of a natural kind of succession of things there. Okay? Fossil record also supports that to an extent. Okay? That animals were more recent in the fossil record than photosynthetic organisms. The very first organisms in the fossil record are something called blue-green algae. Okay? Very simple single-celled organisms that could carry out photosynthesis. Okay? That process would have naturally come first. Okay. All right. I would like you guys to answer those 5 questions, please. I'll give you a few minutes to do that. And then while you're doing that, I will hand out your cell diagrams. Then we'll go over these questions and label our diagrams. Okay, so what 3 words are the answer to number 1? Modes of nutrition, exactly. Okay, that's the reason for the differences. They're modes of nutrition. Okay, what organelle supplies plants with energy? Chloroplast. Okay, the chloroplast is what carries out photosynthesis. Okay, yes, mitochondria are going to carry out the cellular respiration, but they got to have something to burn, and it's the chloroplast that makes the glucose. Okay, so it's chloroplast here for number 2, and photosynthesis is the process. All right, for number 3, in animal cells, go ahead.
Centrioles.
Oh, the centrioles help with the cell division. They are only in animal cells for sure, but they don't help with the digestion.
The one that starts with an L.
Yes, the one that starts with an L. Lysosome, yeah, okay? So lysosome is the one that digests the food. So the process it uses is digestion, chemical digestion, okay? Chemical breakdown of proteins, fats, starches, okay, sugars, all of that kind of stuff. Okay, number 4. Transport within plant and animal cells is done in the same fashion. We're actually going to talk about those a little bit tomorrow. Okay, we're talking about things like diffusion, osmosis, active transport. Those are all cell transport methods, and they both use them. Okay, why would this have been kept the same, evolutionarily speaking, when so many other things have changed? How does natural selection work? You guys are dark. It kills these things. Sort of, yeah. I mean, it sort of does. Natural selection picks the things that are most well adapted to their environment. Okay? Yes, that does mean that ones that are not well adapted die, but natural selection doesn't kill them. Their own inadequacies are what kill them. Okay? And it doesn't necessarily kill them either. Okay? Natural selection simply works like this. If you have something about you that's genetic and allows you to reproduce more often than your compatriots, okay, or maybe like your litter mates if we're talking about wolves or something like that, okay, your genes are going to show up more in the next generation because they'll be selected for. You're stronger, so you'll be healthier, and you'll reproduce more often than someone who's just struggling to get by, okay? So over time, the less well-adapted genes disappear, sometimes because they die out right away, or other times just because they get kind of selected against in a breeding situation, and those genes just never end up being passed on. Okay? That's how natural selection works. So if this is still being done this way, it's because it's the best. Okay? Nothing better has come along. Okay? Natural selection says if it ain't broke, don't fix it. All right? Unless something way better comes along, we're going to stick with what we have. Right? That's how natural selection works. So if, let's say, for example, you're looking at a pack of wolves. Okay? One wolf in that pack can see well both day and night. All the other wolves can only see well during the day. Okay? Is that going to mean that wolf is going to be able to catch more food, be bigger and stronger? Okay. Does that mean it's going to be more successful in passing on its genes? Do its genes contain the gene for being able to see both day and night? Okay, well then eventually, over time, all the wolves in that pack will see both day and night. Okay, that's how natural selection works. And very shortly, okay, well, shortly, evolutionarily speaking, okay, over a few generations, the other gene will just dilute out and it'll be gone. Okay, that's how it works. All right, everybody okay with that? It's hard to get that feeling because when we look at the fossil record, we just see like, suddenly those organisms are all dead. Okay, they're all gone from the fossil record. Well, yeah, it looks like they just stopped, but it could have been over 1,000 years that stop in the fossil record happens. The fossil record, remember, is a representation of huge geologic timescales. Okay? All right, and number 5, the nutritional needs of plants and animals are very different. Okay, which would have survived best on a primordial, that's very early young Earth, okay, that had very little oxygen or organic material available. We kind of already talked about this. Which showed up first? Yeah, the photoautotrophs would have shown up first because they could use the raw materials that were available. Okay, if you require the organic material from other organisms, there aren't any. You've got nothing to eat. All right, you have to be able to use the carbon dioxide. Okay. Let's look at our diagrams here. So we'll start with the plant cell. Okay. And we'll start right up here, okay, on the top. What is this big purple thing? That is the nucleus. All right, nucleus. Now, somewhere along the way, some well-meaning science teacher taught you that the nucleus is the brain of the cell. It's not a brain, okay? Cells make up brains. Brains are made of cells. Cells don't have brains, okay? It's not the brain of the cell. You can stop with that right now, okay? The nucleus stores DNA. All of your genetic material is in your nucleus. So if you want an analogy for what the nucleus is a library. Okay? All the genetic material is stored in the library. If some part of the cell needs to access some of that information, it can. But the nucleus itself doesn't actually control things like a brain does. It doesn't monitor things. It doesn't control metabolism and stuff like that. That's not what it does, but that's what a brain does. So a brain is not a good analogy. A library is a better one. Okay? What I would expect if you were telling me, like, you know, if I gave you a picture of a cell and said, tell me what it is and what its function is, stores DNA would be a great thing to say, okay, for the nucleus. Now, we're going to go over that stuff tomorrow. You don't have to write it necessarily today. Okay? All right. Inside of the nucleus is this slightly darker, usually, structure inside. What is that? Sounds like nucleus. Nucleolus. Nucleolus. Now, I'm not huge on spelling, except when it comes to these two structures, because they're so similar, okay? These two would have to be spelled correctly on a test, okay? Now, the nucleolus actually does control some things within the cell, right? Mostly, what it does is copies your DNA, right? So we said already that the nucleus is like a library. All the genetic information that you need to do anything your body needs, make anything your body needs is stored in there. The nucleolus is kind of like the librarian, okay? So if part of the cell says, I need the instructions for making adrenaline, right? The nucleolus will find the part of your DNA that codes for adrenaline, and it'll copy it, okay? This is not a lending library, okay? They're not sending out the book for adrenaline and then hoping it comes back, okay? It's very protective about all of its information. So all it does is make a copy of it and sends the copy out. And then that copy can be used to build the proteins or whatever else the cell requires. So the nucleolus helps with that protein synthesis by copying sections of your DNA and sending the copies out, okay? All right, around the nucleus is a special membrane, okay? And it's called, oddly enough, the nuclear membrane. Okay? The nuclear membrane is different than other membranes. Okay, it's much different than the cell membrane in that it's basically impermeable. Okay? Impermeable means nothing can pass through it, because obviously there's important stuff inside of it. We don't want just anything to be able to get in and out of the nucleus. Covering the nuclear membrane are these little pores. Okay? They're not going to be labeled on here, and they're also not something I'm going to expect you to label, but they're called nuclear pores, and they can be opened and closed to allow the copies of the DNA that the nucleolus makes get out. Okay? But basically nothing gets back in. We don't want things to get in. All right? That's how viruses work, right? Their DNA gets back in through the nuclear pores because, well, genetic information is only supposed to be inside the nucleus. So that's really the only thing that gets in or out. Okay, this line right here looks like it's pointing at nothing, but it's not. The cell, what parts of it aren't organelles, is filled with a fluid. Okay, what's that fluid called? What's okay? Sometimes people know. I don't expect that you guys necessarily know, but sometimes people do. Okay, it's called cytoplasm. Okay. Cytoplasm is basically like water, okay? But it contains obviously a bunch of things dissolved in it as well, right? It's not like a jelly or a jello or anything like that. It's basically water filling up the cell. Okay? It's important that there's a fluid filling up the cell because that helps things move easily within the cell. If the cell was just full of air, it would be a lot more difficult for materials to move through the cell. So it's better that it's filled with a fluid. Okay, questions so far? All right, what's the brown stuff with the green dots on it? Anybody know? Okay, this is the rough endoplasmic reticulum, which you can abbreviate ER, so the rough ER. Okay, and we call it rough because it's got these little bumps all over it. Okay, so rough ER, you don't have to write endoplasmic reticulum every time, okay, but you can just write rough ER. The rough ER is usually very close / surrounding the nucleus. You can see it quite clearly through a microscope, even the ones that we have, all right? The best way to find it is once you find the nucleus, if the nucleus was a face, the rough ER looks like a beard, okay? It just kind of is on one side of it, and I mean, it might be upside down, the face might be upside down, but it usually kind of looks like if the nucleus was a face, like the face had a beard, okay? And it's going to be on one side, right? Now, the rough ER has a lot to do with moving proteins around, okay? Remember that the nucleus is what, the nucleolus is what helps to control the synthesis of proteins. You want that to go on pretty close to the source of the information. So, okay, the rough ER helps to transport a lot of the proteins that are getting made, and it's covered with these little dots that actually make the protein. All right, so the little dots that cover it are called ribosomes. Okay, and ribosomes make protein. Not all ribosomes are attached to the rough ER. Okay? There are some that just float freely around in the cytoplasm. Okay? So very simply, ribosomes make protein. That's their job. All right, next line is this one here, and it's pointing at the brown stuff, but the brown stuff kind of doesn't have any dots on it. So if this stuff is rough, this stuff is? Smooth, yes, the opposite of rough, smooth. Okay, so this is the smooth ER. And like every cell diagram I have ever seen, this one does a terrible job of showing how much smooth ER there is. The reason all cell diagrams do a terrible job of that is because it's basically everywhere. And if they drew how much of it there really was, you wouldn't see anything else. Okay? So the smooth ER has tons of jobs. Okay? It actually does a lot of things within the cell, and it takes up a lot of the volume of the cell. But because it doesn't have any ribosomes on it, you can't see it with our microscopes. It's basically transparent. All right, what's the yellow thing called? It's kind of got a funny name. Starts with a G. The Golgi, yeah. Golgi apparatus, yes. Golgi apparatus. If you want an analogy for what the Golgi apparatus does, it's kind of in shipping and receiving. So, you know that big Amazon sorting facility they have out in Balzac? Okay, just north of Calgary? Okay, Amazon has their huge facility there. Okay, stuff comes in, it gets repackaged, it goes in the trucks, and then it ends up on your doorstep. That's what the Golgi apparatus does for the cell. Okay, it's in shipping and receiving. Stuff comes in, it gets packaged, and it gets exported from the cell from the Golgi. Okay? All right. What are the blue things? Those are mitochondria. All right, and mitochondria, oh, that's supposed to be an A, that doesn't look like a letter. Okay? The mitochondria, they carry out cellular respiration. That's where glucose gets broken down. Yeah. All right, what would this structure be just inside of the green one? Oh, we already got the cytoplasm. That's a good guess, though. It's close. Cell membrane. Yeah. Plant cells still have a cell membrane. All cells have a membrane. Okay? right? And then the green thing on the outside of that would be the cell wall, right? Now, here's the thing, guys, and this is another thing that no cell diagram does a good job of. The cell wall is not a wall like that, okay? It's not solid like that. The cell wall is actually more like, if you've ever seen a house being built, when they're first framing the house, you can walk through the walls. That's what the cell wall is like. The cell wall is a frame, not a wall, okay? So anything can get through the cell wall. It's the cell membrane that actually keeps things or controls what gets in and out. The cell wall is just a frame. It just supports the shape of the cell, okay? It's not like a castle wall, okay, that keeps bad things out. It doesn't have any protective function whatsoever. Okay? It's just a frame to support the cell. It should really be called the cell frame, but I don't control the names. Right? We could, maybe call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of Cell Frame, since apparently we can rename things whatever we want. Okay. All right, I personally like Gulf of second place hockey teams myself. It's a good name for it. Yeah. Okay. So we are looking at the green thing. What's the green thing? Chloroplast. Okay, what does the chloroplast do? It carries out photosynthesis, exactly. Makes sugar for the cell using photosynthesis. Okay, the big blue thing right here. This is the water vacuole. Okay, and that water vacuole works with the cell wall to hold the shape of the cell and keep the plant so that its leaves are upright, okay, and carrying out photosynthesis. Now, last thing. The water vacuole actually needs a special membrane to hold the water in it. Okay, that special membrane is labeled right here, and it is called a tonoplast. Okay, T-O-N-O-P-L-A-S-T, tonoplast. All right, questions on the plant cell?
Isn't there, there's like a line,
Did I miss one?
like under the green, like.
Here?
Yeah.
Oh, I meant to airbrush that out. I airbrushed it out over here. I missed that little part of it. Yeah, don't worry about that. Okay, now, if the structure's in both plant and animal cell, does it do the same thing? Like, does the nucleus do the same thing in both cells? Okay, so if it's in both cells, it has the same job. That's good for you because it means less. It's not like you have to study two cells that all have different things. Okay, a lot of the structures are common, and if they're common, they do the same thing. All right, so we'll go through this one faster because we've already done a bunch of these things. What's the big purple thing?
The nucleus.
Okay, now we do have to add a couple of lines, or maybe I added them on yours, but I didn't get them on here. Okay, what's this big purple thing? Nucleolus. Does it have a line on yours?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the nucleolus. Okay, I don't remember why I didn't put the line on here, but also, is the way we're drawing the labels on here the right way to do it on a diagram? No, because it looks like this is exploding. Okay, and then obviously the outside of it would be the nuclear membrane. I don't know if I put a line for that on your diagram or not. Okay, but it should say nuclear membrane. Struggling with the C's today. Okay. What would this one be pointing at? Cytoplasm, yeah. Both plants and animals have that. What are the yellow things? Those weren't in the plant cell. What's one of the things the animal cell has that the plant cell doesn't? Okay, it does have lysosomes, but the yellow things are not lysosomes. They are, starts with C. Centrioles. Centrioles. These are the centrioles. Okay? They're those things that help with cell division. Okay? One goes to each pole on the cell and pulls all the DNA to that cell. Okay? So they look like, is it rigatoni? Yeah, they look like rigatoni.
Oh, shoot. Nuclear.
All right, what's this stuff? Rough ER. What are the little dots? Ribosomes. Okay, what's the big blue thing? Mitochondria. Okay, that carries out cellular respiration. Okay, now there's a kind of a rust-colored dot here, or like structure here, or bubble, and then there's a blue bubble. Okay, so here's how we're going to differentiate between these, because again, this is something no cell diagram does well. Okay, inside of this one, there's food. Okay, and that makes this a lysosome. Okay, lysosomes are where digestion actually occurs. So there has to be food inside them for digestion to be occurring. Okay, the rust-colored one only has the enzymes for digestion. It hasn't started digesting anything. It hasn't encountered a food particle yet. Okay, so it's just got the enzymes. It is called a peroxisome. If I had this on a test, peroxisome. Okay, I would make it very obvious that one had something in it and the other was kind of empty looking. Okay, so Peroxisome. Peroxisome. All right, what's this one pointing at? Cell membrane. Okay, no cell wall here. What's the yellow thing?
Golgi.
That is the Golgi apparatus. All right, and I think that takes care of it all. Oh, no, smoothie R didn't get labeled. Okay, I'm just going to put that out over here. Anything else we missed? I think we're good there. All right, so now you got your diagrams. Like I said, this week's quiz is just going to be on lesson 1. Some stuff on microscopy, like I show you a picture and you can estimate the size of the object inside. Okay, and then cell theory stuff. Okay, and the modes of nutrition. Okay, so that stuff. That's what's on this week's quiz. Next week is going to be all about parts of the cell and what they do. Tip. You want a good way to study for labeling the parts of the cell? Just go on Google and go unlabeled cell diagram, okay? And tons of them will come up. And then you see if you can label them and then refer back to the thing we just did and see if you got it right, okay? There's like an endless supply of cell diagrams online, okay? Where you could easily do that. And then, you can make flashcards, things like that. Now, before you pack up here, guys, something I want to talk to you about in terms of preparing for biology, okay? In chemistry, the best way to study was to practice your skills, okay? In biology, it's different, okay? In biology, this is what we do. Okay? Read, apply, recall, evaluate. Rare. Okay? So, the most important thing is you need to read. You have to read your notes. Okay? Maybe even rewrite your notes in a shorter form. Find the key points, highlight, whatever. Okay? You are going to be asked to apply that stuff. Okay, so, I teach you about how a plant grows, and then on a test I say, this tree looks funny, why does it look that way? You would have to apply what you learned about plant growth to tell me why the plant looks that way. Okay? Recall. Sometimes it's just a matter of, I taught you something and you got to tell me what it is, like labeling a cell. That's recall. Okay? And then evaluate. Sometimes I'll give you a situation and ask you to evaluate if that is something that is valid or not based on what you know. It's kind of an application question, but it's a little bit higher level. Okay? So in biology, read, apply, recall, evaluate. It involves a lot more reading and writing than practicing. There's not a lot of skills to practice in this. Okay? Reading, okay? Applying, evaluating, recalling, that's important. Okay, good job today, guys.